Thank you. Our final speaker is Mr. Jeff Schoep, who is the former leader of the National Socialist Movement. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Assemblymember Bloom. I'm honored and humbled to be here, and all of you on the Assembly, thank you very much. Wanted to talk a little bit about, we'll start out with inside white nationalism and a look inside neo-Nazism in America. This picture you see up here was the National Socialist Movement about 2 years ago, 2017. I think it was 2017. So I'm actually in this picture somewhere. Before I get onto this, though, I'd like to apologize to the local community for the part my organization had in some of the incidents that took place here over the years. It's not easy to get up here and after 27 years in a movement to admit that you were wrong, that the life that you lived, or my entire adult life, was wrong and incorrect. So bear with me a little bit if I'm slow in the delivery of the speaking here. I spoke for many years in the National Socialist Movement, and I can tell you, out of all those years, this is probably one of the hardest speeches I've ever had to give, because it's not easy to admit one's wrong with the past. So let's move on here. In the early years, just like to tell you a little bit about my story and where I come from and so on, so you can kind of get an idea, the public can kind of get an idea of how people get involved in this movement and going forward from that. That's me as a small child, and so we all start out like this. So this is, I want to remind people that we're all human beings, and a lot of times I see, when we think about when the outside world, because of the hatred and because of the nasty things that the white nationalist movement has done, and especially some of the most horrible incidents like we heard about here today, like the synagogue shootings, the mosque shootings and stuff like that, I think it's easy to dehumanize people and to realize or to believe that we're not dealing with human beings here. So at the risk of coming off as an apologist for these people, I certainly am not that, but I want people to understand that this is a two-way street, and so I wanted to explain kind of how and why I joined the movement. Can't see this picture very well, but this looks like a rally. I think this was here in California. But I also want to get into a little bit of the psychology of why people join the movement. A lot of people believe that getting involved in this is about hate. It's because you hate somebody. I can tell you that I come from a middle-class home. I didn't have a story like a lot of the other formers do, where they were beaten up, they were bullied, they came from a one-family home. They had all these problems with drugs or struggles and things like that. I came from a very good, decent, normal, middle-class family, and I got brought into this movement. I was in this movement until March of this year. So people can come from all walks of life and get involved in this sort of thing. So there's me again. This was quite a long time ago. This was back in the 1990s. And recruitment, anyone can be recruited. We'd find the commonalities in people, and we'd build on that. For example, religion. If someone came to us and their hatred or their experience, they were very religious, we'd give them Christian identity, and we'd bring them into the movement that way. Recruitment was not targeted at one specific thing. We targeted at anything. We could take specific things like religion and give them Christian identity, which says that the white race is the chosen people of God. experiences. If someone came to us and said, for example, a female that had been raped by somebody of another race, we would play on that. We would focus on that issue, because once they're in, they're in. Then some of the other things that maybe they didn't agree with or didn't understand everything, if we get them in the door, that's all we were trying to do. Hatreds. So if someone came to us and said they didn't like black people or they didn't like Jews, we would expound on that. We had literature specifically tailored to all of those different things, whether it was crimes between the races, whether it was the Jewish question, whether it was God that was saying it through religion. We had things that were based on all of these different things. And through recruitment, we did, every aspect, everything you could imagine, from video games, from music, from leaflets to podcasts. I think the National Socialist Movement now, even today, has probably 5 podcasts a week. We developed 2 video games in the last few years. We developed all kinds of different things. Basically, to combat these type of things, what we need to do is build a parallel network and replace all those things. Because once people get involved in this, and I keep saying I don't like to compare it to a cult, but in a lot of ways it is like a cult, because you're living your life in sort of a bubble, and you don't see outside that bubble. Life is so much different for me now because I'm outside of that bubble. Like it's like a whole new life, a whole new group of human beings. Like when you are in the movement, your mind is closed to so many different things. Like I was telling the story on the way over here, where I knew another guy that had gotten out of my organization a year before I did, and he said, and it might sound crazy to people, but he said, when I'm out now and I hold the door for somebody, he says, I don't have to look around real quick and see if anybody saw that, because the person might have been of another race. We talk. I say that now today, and I think, man, that's the kind of thinking process that we had in those days. Like that is it's just almost unfathomable, but just like a small act of kindness that's normal, right? You just didn't see those things. So I want to use I want to draw off my experience in the movement, and what I'm doing now. Here's me at a press conference. I think this was last year, and here. These are both from 2018, I believe. So what I'm doing now, by speaking out on this, and I know a lot of people, kind of wonder about that sort of thing. Speaking out on this sort of thing is not easy. In the movement, when you leave, you retire. Like originally, I just retired from the movement. That's easy. You can retire, no big deal. When you start speaking out and do this sort of thing, they look at that as if you are the worst kind of traitor, the worst kind of individual ever. But I want to draw off my experience, my knowledge of the movement, the way people think, how they think, the psychology of that, why they do what they do, to combat this in an appropriate way and to help. This is my way of giving back. For a lot of people that question my sincerity or wonder why I'm doing this sort of thing, simply put, for me, it would have been a lot easier to stay where I was at. I knew what I was doing in this world, in the sense of how to do it, how it worked. My business was tied in with this. Everything I knew was tied in with this. What I'm doing now is starting over from ground zero. Why? Because this was wrong. What I was doing for all those years was wrong. I knew it was wrong 3 years ago, but I didn't get out. Why? Because it was easier to just stay stuck there, like a guy that's working at a terrible job that he hates every day and just keeps doing it and doing it and doing it. I'm not proud of that. I'm ashamed to say it, but it's the truth. It was easier to stay where I was at. Why I didn't stay any longer is I couldn't stand the violence that was coming, the violence that was already happening, and the violence that's to come if we don't combat this in the correct manner. And part of that, drawing off my experience, is I want to talk about dehumanization. Dehumanization is a two-way street, and that's a word I didn't even know a number of years ago. And I'll tell you how I came across it, and one of the ways that broke down my ideology and the way that I thought. I saw, and I'll just give a quick story, but I saw a video on YouTube of a young man that was wearing a swastika armband. I believe it was in Seattle or Portland, somewhere out there. And he got off a bus and he was, talking like this and having a conversation, trying to expound the ideology, I'm assuming, of the movement. He was knocked out on the street, and people were laughing, and they filmed it and kind of walking over him. I think people might have been spitting on him and filming it. Nobody helped this young man. So at the time when I was in the movement, and we used videos like this all the time to, promote our cause and say like what we were doing was right. When I joined the movement, I thought I was doing what was right. I thought I was standing up for my people. And that's what a lot of the people that are involved in it, they're idealists. They believe they're standing up for their people. That's why this is going to be a hard thing to break. They're not joining it because they just blindly hate. I mean, there is those types in there too. But I'm saying for me personally and for a lot of the people that I knew, it was about ideology. It was about trying to save the white race, as Rick and some of the other panelists have kind of touched upon here. The thinking of these guys in that. So back onto the dehumanization subject, seeing this young man treated like that, and a lot of people go, oh my gosh, why should I feel sorry for this guy that got knocked out in the street? Because at the time, as I was saying, I'm seeing the dehumanization of this guy. But now, since being out, I see that, wow, here's somebody that's upset about a guy from the movement being dehumanized. In the movement, we dehumanized entire races of people, entire religions, entire ethnic groups for years and years and years. What kind of a hypocrite is going to talk about the dehumanization of a white person when they couldn't see the dehumanization of so many others? You see, and that reality didn't come to me until after I was out, until after I had time to decompress my mind and basically look back and go, wow, I could see the dehumanization of this guy, this stranger that I didn't know. But being someone that propagated hate and intolerance and all this sort of thing for all these years, I didn't see that dehumanization of all those other people. But I see it now. And that's why I feel like there's hope for all of us if we can tackle this issue the right way. And up here on the photo on the left, we have a rally. That's me there speaking with NSM members and members of other groups. That was in Pikeville, I think, in Kentucky in 2016. On the right, we have a picture of a far-left extremist group, Antifa. And that's back onto the dehumanization. It's a vicious cycle of hate. Combating violent extremism and preventing violent extremism, CVE and PVE, is one of the things I work with now with a nonprofit called Parallel Networks that helps people leave various forms of extremism. Extremism can come in many forms. It's not just the far right. The far left is up here, jihadi movements, and other types of extremism. We see it, whether it's gang membership or all the different kinds of extremism, Antifa, far right, jihadi, Muslim extremist, all types of extremism when they lead to violence are wrong, period. Oh, so this is what I should have had up here. So here we have ISIS. It may be Al-Qaeda, but I believe that's ISIS or Al-Shabaab in Somalia. And again, we're talking, there's many kinds of extremism, and I know this is primarily focused on the far right here today, but I felt it was important to point out the other forms of extremism because they are all potentially dangerous. Polarization. Countering extremism through compassion, understanding, and kindness. I know that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, but if we really truly want to reach people, one of the most effective tools that I've seen since getting out, and I brought a lot of other people out of the NSM, with me when I left, and I've brought people out since, a few from other organizations, a few that were independents, and a number of people from the group, and I always try to keep my door open to those individuals because I know we can reach a lot more. There's some people that are never going to come out. There's some people that will never change no matter what. If someone would have approached me 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have left either. But we have to understand that being compassionate and understanding, as hard as that may be, and not everybody can do it. I know that that's not even possible for a lot of people. But you have to understand, and this is why I'm here today, to explain how this works and how they think and how they feel. Extremists feel isolated. Their increased isolation will only further radicalize them. As I mentioned about, simply holding a door for somebody of another race. In the movement, there's people that won't even go to an ethnic restaurant. They won't go and see certain movies. They won't even talk to somebody of another race or things like that unless they have to. So these people are already self-isolated. So it's very hard to reach people like that. So a lot of times, simply breaking through that polarization and getting them to understand that you're a human being too. I mean, this is a lot of the ways it broke it down for me was, originally I'm from Minnesota, and I moved to Detroit. In Detroit, the whites are a minority. I was forced basically to deal with people of other races on a daily basis for many, many years. And I met so many wonderful people from all different racial backgrounds and started hearing their stories like, wow, this person's family is no different than mine. This person has the same struggles that I do. And as simplistic as that sounds, when you're in this cult-like environment or in this bubble, you don't look beyond that. You don't see that. So a lot of times, simply humanizing the person sitting across from you and getting them out of that isolation and treating them with compassion and kindness really works. A friend of mine by the name of Daryl Davis, he's a black guy that goes and attends Klan meetings and befriends Klansmen. And a lot of people think Daryl's absolutely crazy. When I first met him, I said, man, you are crazy. But what he does works because he'll sit down with them and he will break through all those stereotypes and find commonalities. Because we all have commonalities. We all have differences too, but the differences are so much less than the commonalities and the similarities between all the different people and all different races. And I see it clearly now, but it was harder to see before, you see? So if we can break through that as a community, as people, as human beings, we're going to get somewhere, and we can possibly, nearly eradicate this type of thinking and this type of movement. Disengagement, then de-radicalization. If you come up to these people and you get in their face, and this is another reason why I included Antifa, because the Antifa's tactics have never worked, ever. Throwing urine balloons, attacking people, punching a Nazi in the face, all these kind of things, they don't work. I've been through all that, and I can tell you, never once did those kind of tactics work. You're not going to punch somebody in the face and get them go, oh, hey, man, I was wrong. I got punched in the face really hard. No, you're going to get punched in the face and you're going to fight back and you're going to get further radicalized. Usually those kind of tactics further radicalize the individual and drive them back into that space that you're trying to get them out of. So we have to look at this from a compassionate way and attack it that way. That, in my mind, and from my experience, that is the best way. Attacking violence with violence does not work. Meeting hate with hate does not work. Programs and solutions. And this is one of the things that we're here to talk about today. Academics, counselors, formers, working together to provide support. I think it's very important that all of us work together in collaboration. Academics, counselors, formers. When I say formers, I mean like former extremists, whether it's from the far right, the far left, jihadi movements, that sort of thing. Because we understand how they think, what got them there, call it street cred, call it whatever you want, but we do understand the psychology of it. We don't have all the answers that, some of the academics have, but all together we can provide the kind of support that it takes to get these people out of the movement. And I want to say, like, similar, one female that left the movement after I did, she said, you know what, we need to have a program like Alcoholics Anonymous, but for the movement. And I said, what, are you saying you're an alcoholic? And she says, no, you know what I mean. We need to have a support group, because they're saying, like she was saying, and this is true for just about everybody, you've lost all your friends, you've lost your support network, you've lost most of the people you know. Some of these people don't have strong family support networks, so everyone they knew, everyone around them was in that bubble. And now that they're out of it, they don't have anybody. So it's very important that there's programs in place to try to help these people. So for some, it might be further education, job placement, vocational training programs to get them out of get them off the streets, immersion programs. I'm going to explain what that is. It's a little bit like I was talking about. Immersion programs would be something that works hand in hand with community and outreach leaders, whether it's mosques, synagogues, community centers, churches, things like that, volunteers and people from all different aspects and walks of life. If you take somebody from the movement, and I have one person or one experience that I can draw upon was I was in a movie called White Right, and the filmmaker is Dia Khan. And Dia Khan is an activist from the left. She's a Muslim from Pakistan. And she met people in the NSM and other organizations, and this woman's kindness and compassion, reaching people and just humanizing them, touched them in a lot of different ways. And she would spin it to them like, so you want to throw me out of this country? Would you throw me out of this country? And a lot of the guys couldn't answer that, or they couldn't answer it right, or it shook them to their core, because this nice woman that they liked is asking a question that was very unsettling to them. It broke down that barrier, and some of the people that were in that film have left. So that type of thinking, people that have persevered and done that sort of thing, and for her, she was a victim. She was a victim of white supremacy. And I won't get into her story because that's not for me to tell, but she was a victim. So it takes this unprecedented amount of compassion to be able to do things like that. It reminds me of another woman, Hope Hyder, that works with us at Parallel Networks. Hope's father was, and Hope is a black woman, her father was murdered by a white supremacist. And Hope is probably one of the most forgiving people. She has the kind of forgiveness that I don't think I could ever have, or that most people could ever have. She attends the parole hearings for the guy that killed her father. She's been able to forgive and try to understand that sort of thing. So I think forgiveness is a powerful, powerful tool. And I'm not suggesting we go to the level that Hope was able to go to, but that's one of the things we do with Parallel Networks is we work with former jihadis, former white nationalists, victims of hate, that sort of thing, along with academics, and get everybody to work together and build this new community, because we need to replace, why it's Parallel Networks is because we're trying to replace what they have lost. You know, build a new network for the people to have something positive in their life. And actually today, Control-Alt-Delete Hate magazine. This is something that we're going to be inserting into Telegram. The print edition, I had hoped to bring some copies of it with, but it literally just came off the presses today. This is a magazine that we've produced to break down these sort of things and to get it into the people's hands so we can break down hate. It's written completely by formers, victims of hate, and academics in these roles. If the extremist wants help from these programs, assuming these programs do come into existence in the future, I would suggest making the immersion programs mandatory. Make sure, because that will break down the stereotypes and the old hatreds. So if we are going to, it's like taking someone that has a crack addiction problem and you go, okay, well, you've walked away from everything. Here's a handful of money and a new apartment in the old crack neighborhood. What are they going to do? They're going to go right back to the crack activity. It's going to be the same thing with the movement or any sort of addiction. you need to have things in place. You can't just say, well, I've disengaged this person, I've got them out, so problem solved, it's done. No, a lot of these people need long-term counseling, they need that new network, they need a support group, or they could go back. And that's what we're trying to avoid. You know, having someone say, oh, I'm done, and then falling right back into the previous behavior is not something that's healthy or positive, and we need to do that as well. So making the immersion programs mandatory, I think, would be a really positive thing, because it will show them that these are other human beings that they're dealing with, and they may have isolated themselves when they were in the white nationalist movement, but meeting with these volunteers or people that want to help in this type of thing, I think it would make a big difference, I really do. And the formers have a critical role in this because of our understanding on how to reach these people that are lost, you know, and kind of break it down for them. What they don't realize, and what a lot of people don't realize, as one guy said to me, he says, what good things has the movement brought in all the years you were in it? I said, it's brought blood, sweat, and tears. There's not a lot of good things. It's a lot of negativity. It's a lot of, it's a rough life. It's not a good life. And they don't even realize it. It's like being lost in a tunnel and not understanding what you've really lost. And then you come out and you see, like, it's like the kid that can't see and he gets new glasses or contacts. And I was that kid, by the way. Got glasses and said, wow, I can read all the signs in the mall. You know, that's what it's like coming out when you finally see, like, what you've been missing. Change is possible. This is me today. After 27 years, to be able to walk away from something like this, change is possible. Real change can and does happen. No one's born this way. We're not born with these hatreds. Hate is learned and it can be unlearned. Shaming and degradation, shaming these people, attacking these people is not going to help. It's going to increase their radicalization. It's going to push them farther in. Kindness and compassion is absolutely the best way if you really, truly want to reach somebody. And the road to redemption, I believe that most people can be redeemed. None of us is perfect. We all have had things that we're ashamed of, bad things that we've done in the past. And I think for everybody that redemption is possible, typically, yes. That's all for today for my presentation. I'd like to once again thank everybody.